Basically, entrepreneurship is the process of creating something new of value. Remember that, new of value, by a person who takes the risks. Risk-taking is very important in this process, and the risks are not just financial, although they're there. The risks are also social and psychological. The risk of failure to an individual. The risk of failure to a society. Is he or she going to be accepted when that happens? So we have three real risks in starting a company: social, psychological, and financial. By doing the necessary time and effort. And indeed, one of the things that I've talked about the good doctor, and is true in every single entrepreneur I know, and I know I feel it myself, is we have incredible energy levels. And we want to drive something so it's successful. And that time and energy has to be there, or this new creation isn't going to happen. Remember, everything is against creating something new. Everything. The laws, the society, the rules, everything. It's always said, you can't do that. And entrepreneurs take the exact opposite and say, yes, we can. And finally, it's the accomplishment, because you got to reap the rewards. And that's the final part of the definition, the rewards. And you know what the craziest thing is, the greatest reward we have, is giving back. And that's what entrepreneurs do. They make an impact on society. They employ people. They touch people's lives, and they give back. Now, what are the elements that are needed in a society in order to do that? There are four, and you can study this in any country. I've worked in Russia, I've worked in China, I've worked in Slovenia, I've worked in Hungary, and I worked in Ireland, and I was in Ireland in '84 when the Prime Minister was talking about that. In fact, I was a visiting professor at the university he graduated from, the President of Ireland, University of Limerick. And back in Limerick, and back in '84, Ireland was a basket case. They had about the same unemployment level you do, 36%. Theirs was 32%. And Ireland said, what could we do? And one of the reasons, when I was a professor then at MIT, they asked me to come over and help them start entrepreneurship and innovation. And that's exactly what we need to do here. So what are those four things? Number one is the infrastructure. The infrastructure is what makes entrepreneurs different in different countries. So the infrastructure causes differences, and whether that has several elements we want to look for. What is the tax structure on individuals starting businesses? What is the tax structure on the businesses they start? What is the support mechanisms that the government has in place for business to be started? What is the government attitude towards entrepreneurship and people starting their companies? What does the government do to help in terms of that being a place where you want to start a business? The ease of doing business in a country. That's measured over 180 countries. The ease of starting a business. That's measured over the same 180 countries. The degree of competitiveness of the country. That's measured as well over these countries. And then foreign direct investment, because the countries that have this kind of interest in this kind of culture tends to attract more foreign direct investment. Do you know, to start a business in Austria, you have to have 11,500 euro in the bank. You got to visit 4 governmental agencies, and it probably will take you anywhere from 3 to 6 months to start your company. No wonder very few businesses start in Austria. Let's take the United States. We have our problems, don't get me wrong, but one thing we understand is making it easy for the entrepreneurs to start companies. I can put $50, pay $50, and charge it to my MasterCard, so I may not ever pay that if I go bankrupt. So it costs me nothing, and in 15 minutes, I have my company. Why do we start so many businesses in the United States? Are we smarter than anybody else? No. We do it because what? It's easy. One of the things we have to look about and here is the infrastructure, how businesses are formed and how we can encourage people to form those. Point two, the idea. This is the essence of the business. And no matter what happens and what you do, a bad idea will not succeed. This innovation is the cornerstone of every business. Now, the creativity is in every single country I've ever been in. I even see it here in just my brief 3 days here. How do we determine which ones are worth something? We have to do, first step is to say, who is our competition? You need to have 3 to 5 things that makes your idea different, better, cleaner, whatever the words are, the adjectives don't matter, than something on the market. Step 2 is you say, well, listen, this is pretty good. I've already made it through this. Who's my market? And then I got to make sure my market is not just my grandmother and myself. A market of 2. And that is a real tough decision. So I got to have a market that's large enough to warrant me to go into it, that is growing, and one where I can have a competitive advantage. Then I got to say, well, what skill sets do I need to do this? And I said, well, I got to have somebody that knows outsourcing. Well, I don't know outsourcing, but maybe somebody else you know does. I need to know marketing. Well, I know marketing fairly well. I'll keep that. I need to know at least something about financing and raising capital. Well, maybe I can find that if I don't know that. And then finally, the last part of this, and it's so important to do this, I got to say, what now, from this point in time, does it take for me to launch my business? And go step by step by step and write it down. If you don't write it down, you're not going to do it. And at each of those steps, I want you to promise me to write down 3 things. How much is it going to cost? Just estimate. How long is it going to take? And at the end of that time, when you've gone through that, you come up and I want you to sum up all the money. And then I want you to say to yourself, do I have that capital? And if the answer is no, then you say, does Aunt Susie or Uncle Ned or my grandmother? Grandmothers are great capital providers, by the way. And if all those turn right, then you know you got an idea you can create a business plan for. And just in my 3 days here, I would not worry about that part here. Number 3 is money. When it gets right down to it, we got to have capital. Now, when you look at capital, you got to think of 3 things at capital in terms of what you want to have to do. You want to look at your capital in terms of how much does it cost. You want to look at your capital in terms of how long do I get it. And you want to look at your capital in terms of, are there any covenants or things that I have to own up to if I don't succeed. And then we have to think about, do we want to do debt, which means I borrow money and pay back an interest and principal, or do we want to do equity? And equity capital we look at in what we call enterprise capital or private capital or capital for the private firm. Where is that capital? An interesting study we've done all over the world has said it comes more from one source than any other source. Private individuals. They're called angels. Don't kid yourself, they are not angels. It's a beautiful word coined by one of my best friends, but it is not an angelic being you're dealing with here. These people basically want return on investment, but they also want to support other things that have an interest to them that they feel is for the good of the country. The total amount of investment in the United States by private individuals is equal to the total amount of investment by the venture capital industry in the United States. We need to encourage individuals that have means to put a part of their assets, not all, no one would do that, but part of their assets into small business startups. And that's where they see a return on investment when the company succeeds that they get from no other investment. The venture capital industry has a role, but in terms of the initial startups money either comes from family, friends, or angel private investors. Whatever economic development the United States has had, wherever we stand in your eyes, what has caused that more than our entrepreneurship, more than our innovation, is the private investors investing in startups. The final thing is the entrepreneur themselves. There's a lot of characteristics that you see embodied right here on the stage. One is they're very, very, very passionate. We ask entrepreneurs, why did you start your venture? Number one, the reason for starting the venture was obviously what? To make money. And that is a drive that entrepreneurs have. Remember, to make money, to give back. Number two, hands down, was passion. So they really are passionate about the idea. And number three is they really want to create employment. They really do. So all over the world, it was the same thing. Money, passion, jobs. Number two is persistence. Persistence. Because as was indicated in the life of the good doctor here, you have to persist. Number three, we have to be ethical doers. And I underline the word ethics. You want to make sure that when you treat a customer, for example, you're treating them for the second sale, not for the first sale. Number four, you have to build a strong coalition of people. A really strong coalition of people. This includes having a board of advisors early on. I always encourage my students when they create business plans that they should actually have a board of advisors right away so that they can give them advice. One of my recommendations in my last one, I think probably the most important one I'm going to make when we get into that section, is I think this country should create a national board of mentors. Because you have to need that mentor, that advisor, whatever you want to call them, that confidant that you can go to and say, geez, I got this problem.